The Renaissance gets credited with restarting Western civilization. Art, science, banking, the printing press, all traced back to roughly 200 years in Italy, starting in the 1300s. But almost nobody agrees on why it started exactly when and where it did. So what if it hadn't? The obvious answer feels comforting. Progress was inevitable, so something like it would have happened somewhere else eventually. That's not actually guaranteed. Start with the trigger most historians point to first, the Black Death. Between 1347 and 1351, the plague killed somewhere between 30 and 60% of Europe's population. That sounds like pure catastrophe, and it was, but it accidentally reshaped the economy underneath it. With so many workers dead, survivors could demand higher wages for the first time in centuries, and the rigid feudal system that had locked peasants into fixed roles started cracking. Without that demographic collapse, the merchant class that would go on to bankroll Renaissance art might never rise at all. Here's the detail that rarely makes it into the popular version of this story. The Renaissance wasn't really an accident of genius, it was substantially an accident of banking. The Medici family in Florence started as a banking dynasty, and one innovation, double-entry bookkeeping, let them accumulate the kind of wealth needed to fund artists like Michelangelo and Botticelli. Remove that fortune, and there's no guaranteed patron stepping in to fund decades of unprofitable experimental art. There's also a detail about geography that's easy to miss. Constantinople fell to the Ottoman Empire in 1453, and waves of Greek scholars fled west into Italy, bringing ancient texts, Plato, Aristotle, mathematics that had been largely lost to Western Europe for nearly 1,000 years. Without that migration, the intellectual fuel behind Renaissance humanism arrives late, scattered, or not at all in the concentrated form that made it so explosive. So picture the world where none of these pieces line up. No plague-driven labor shift, no Medici fortune, no wave of Greek manuscripts arriving in one place at one time. Europe likely stays locked in a slower, more rigid medieval system for another century or more. Push that forward, and the consequences compound. The printing press, invented by Gutenberg around 1440, spread explosively because Renaissance humanism created massive demand for texts. Without that demand primed, the press might still get invented, but it spreads far slower, reaching far fewer people. And there's a consequence buried even deeper. The scientific revolution, Galileo, Newton, built directly on Renaissance-era translations of Greek mathematics and a cultural shift toward evidence over pure authority. Delay the Renaissance by a century, and you likely delay the entire scientific method along with it, which means the Industrial Revolution potentially gets pushed back by a comparable amount of time. We like to imagine progress as a steady upward line, but the actual history looks more like a chain of fragile coincidences, a plague that reshaped labor, a banking family that funded art instead of hoarding wealth, and a collapsing empire that pushed the right scholars to the right city at the right time. Remove any one link, and the chain might not reconnect for centuries. The Renaissance wasn't civilization returning to its natural path. It might have been civilization getting lucky.